All right, so here I have part of my Milwaukee Packout setup. I've got the backpack, the tote, the 3 drawer box with the 2 thin drawers and the 1 larger drawer, and the Milwaukee rolling base. Inside the tote, I've got some Milwaukee scissors. I've got I have pliers. I have Milwaukee box cutter. I've got various screwdrivers and also nut drivers. I also have some long needle nose pliers. In addition to that, I've got some hose pliers, various sizes of these. I think like 3 different types. I have a few pry bars in here, and I also have a few Allen keys. On the other side, I have a Milwaukee 4-volt screwdriver. I also have a hammer. Who doesn't need a hammer? And then going over here to the Milwaukee backpack, I've got my GoPro batteries. I also have my Milwaukee M18 batteries, and then I'm carrying my Milwaukee 12-volt batteries as well. And I also have a neck fan that I bought off of Amazon to try to keep cool. Now, in the drawer box, in the top drawer, I didn't have anything in there, and the second drawer is empty as well. The third drawer has the parts that I happen to pull on that particular day, which is a brake fluid reservoir. This is from a 1991 Saab. The one that I put on my car was from a 96, so it was an exact fit. This is a sensor that I accidentally broke while doing yard work, ironically. And then I have a bag of bolts here. Now, this particular Milwaukee setup with the rolling base, the downfall is the fact that you have to remove everything to get to what is in the bottom box. And this is the process that I have to go through whenever I go to pick and pull. I have to pull everything apart, and that's one of the reasons why I leave the drawer box empty, so that it's a lighter weight when I remove it, for the pick and pull employee to be able to look at my bag to make sure I'm not carrying parts into the yard. Now, taking a closer look at the rolling box space, I've got a Milwaukee bag, and here I have a wrench wrap. That's what I'll call it. This is a wrap that houses all of my box wrenches. Well, not all of them, but a bunch of them. It gives me the ability to carry about 2 of each one. I go all the way from, I want to say, like 10 millimeter in this particular wrap, all the way up to like 25 or 27. I can't remember. And then I also have a few crescent wrenches over to the far left. So oftentimes there are times when you need to use 2 of the same size box wrench. So I'll have like a ratcheting one and then a regular one, or I'll have a long reach and a regular size one in this configuration. Now, the downfall to using this is when you have it in an engine bay of a car, sometimes it can just lean down and some of your wrenches can fall out. So I don't find this to be the most ideal setup, but it is handy for keeping all of your box wrenches in one place. Moving along to inside of the box here, I have my fairly new Quinn impact socket set that I purchased from Harbor Freight. Now, I bought this because it was a lot cheaper than buying the Milwaukee Packout. This is a 48-piece set, and it costs like $99 at Harbor Freight. Now, if I was to buy something equivalent, like say in a Milwaukee Packout, I think they sell a 36-piece set, and it's like $219 or something. So the Milwaukee Packout is great for being able to pop everything together and carry everything as one unit. The downfall is the price. You know, you're going to pay over double for less tools. And when you go into a place like Pick and Pull, it's nice to have tools that aren't quite as expensive. So if something comes up missing, you know, you're not that disappointed. Now here I keep a roll of paper towels. I need to keep some gloves with me. I keep forgetting to bring those. I have some miscellaneous bags for small parts if I choose to get some. And this is just a drill set where you have all your different bits and some of the nut drivers that I can use with that 4-volt screwdriver, and also my Milwaukee 12-volt multi-head drill. This is handy because you never know when you're going to need any one of these particular bits while you're pulling parts on a car. Next here I have part of my Icon Master puller set, because on this particular day my goal is to get down and pull the hub and the rotor off of the vehicle. So I brought that. I didn't bring the whole thing because the set is big. And this is my Milwaukee 1/2" impact. This is my go-to when I need more tight fasteners or more powerful fasteners. This is my Milwaukee long reach 3/8 inch ratchet. It comes in very handy whenever I need to get leverage on a bolt or nut. And you know, I got to learn how to keep these things clean, because oftentimes I'll get to working and they get all greasy, and as you can see here, I'm just kind of cleaning this up a bit. But I do not regret at all buying this long reach ratchet. It's very handy. Next I have my Milwaukee, I believe this is a 4-head drill. It's just a very versatile drill for different things. I also brought the 4 attachments. Here I've got my 1/4 inch Milwaukee ratchet, and finally I have my 3/8 inch ratchet. I like to carry a lot of my ratchets when I go, because then I can set up different nuts on different things. And then here we've got the main tool that I use, which is the 3/8 impact gun. I use that for 90% of my task, and then I move on to using the 1/2 inch. And then that bag, I have the rest of my Icon parts for the Icon Master Puller set. I need to find a better solution for that, but for this particular day, I just put it in a bag. So that's what I had in my rolling box when I went to my local pick and pull. And as I mentioned, I went there. So the reason why I went on this particular day was because I saw that they had a 1991 Saab, which is the same model as my Saab, and I wanted to go there to see if there were any parts that I could salvage to try to keep my Saab on the road. This is what I had to do to pack it up, and you know, it's pretty heavy to travel like this. However, it's so helpful to have all the tools that you may need on hand. There are many times that I went to pick a pull and I forgot to bring the parts that I needed. Now, idealistically, it would be better to have the rolling drawer box that they just came out with, or the pack out dolly, as opposed to using the tote, the backpack, and the rolling box base, simply because the tote is nice for being able to get to your tools, but somebody can walk by and just reach and grab something. The backpack is cumbersome to actually pull tools out of, and obviously the rolling box base is self-explanatory. When you have to pull everything off to go into that base, that's not super helpful. Now, the one benefit to the rolling box base is I was able to use it as like a sitting stool while I was working in a car, so there was that benefit. I do wish that this setup had pneumatic tires to make it easier to roll over graveled surfaces. Alright guys, we're back at Pick and Pull. I've got my M18. This is my, what's this, 3/8 inch impact gun. And I'm going to go ahead and take this wheel off. So as I mentioned before, this Milwaukee M18 3/8 inch impact wrench is my main go-to tool when I'm working on vehicles, when I need power. Rarely do I need to reach for the 1/2 inch, but when I do, it is definitely important to have. So after removing this wheel, it's going to expose the rotor, obviously, and we're getting down to the hub. So I've already pulled this stuff off on my 91 Saab back home, so I'm fairly familiar with this part. And I'm doing this because I need to get back to that. It's like a main axle portion that's behind the engine, and I want to pull it out of this car so that I can have an extra one at home, because there's a gasket that needs to be replaced. And then also, I was unfamiliar with how to take it off of my car. So as you can see here, I'm using my long reach ratchet to remove part of the caliper and such, and the wheel hub assembly. This is it's very useful to have the GoPro at times like this, because it is a fairly protected camera, and you can move it around and get all kinds of different angles so that people can see what you're doing. Using these M18 and M12 ratchets and wrenches help to prevent repetitive motion injury. So for me, they're very, very useful to have. Unless I'm sleeping, I typically remain very, very busy. As many of you know, I work a 40-hour-a-week job as my main job, And then I've decided to take up woodworking along with being a basic DIYer. I've always been a person to work on my own vehicles and such. And so as I've tried to start to expand into woodworking and that type of thing, I've realized that time is really limited, and I don't have the opportunity to do everything that I would like. I have like more money to invest in the hobby than I do actual time to spend doing the hobby because of tasks like what you see here, which is it's important for me to keep my cars running and to be able to keep them repaired and maintenance properly. And that requires time and work. I've never built a whole car from the ground up, obviously. I've never replaced an engine. Well, I did put an engine in a car many, many years ago. It was like a 78 Chevy Malibu. We used a chain hoist in a tree to put it in there. And I have put in a transmission in a vehicle before. That was probably like, I don't know, I think it was a 78 Chevy Caprice. And I spent all that time putting the transmission in there, and it was a bad transmission. I got it from like a salvage yard or something like that. So I've always been a DIYer when it comes to cars, but I've never like built a car from the ground up or taken a car all the way apart and put it back together. So there's so many different elements of working on a car that I'm unfamiliar with. On this particular Saab, I've replaced the heater core, the rotors, obviously the brakes, probably I think the radiator, the compressor, and several other components. I redid the inside lining of the roof, albeit I was unable to figure out how to change the lining on the moonroof, so that part is not matching. I actually took off some of the door panels and we did some recovering of that. Wasn't a great job, but it was just something that I tinkered with, in trying to build my own personal skills, and also simply because I just would prefer to learn how to do these things myself. And if I have to pay somebody to do it, great, but if I'm able to figure it out myself and save that money, or buy a cool tool to be able to do it myself, that's typically my preference. And as you can see here, I'm not a professional mechanic, but with the help of these tools, I'm moving through this task of, basically dismantling this car. And having places like Pick and Pull, or back in the Midwest, I think they would call it a place like You Wrench It, and being able to go in and, remove parts from these vehicles, it expands your mind. It helps you to demystify all of the things that go into making a car run and making it work well. And as a result, it kind of builds your confidence so that you can tackle some of these jobs on your own. Like, right here, I'm removing one of the struts in the front. And in my whole time of working on cars, this is the second strut that I've ever removed. The first one being the 91 Saab at home. I removed that one because I think I left the struts in place and the shocks in place when I redid my truck. I had to replace the upper and lower control arms. I was not required to actually remove like the front struts and or shocks on that vehicle. So I was apprehensive at first at removing the front strut because I know that it can be dangerous when you're messing with those springs. You might need to get a spring compressor. And I ended up watching a video and learning that as long as you take these 3 bolts on the top off, you don't have to worry about that. However, if you remove that center bolt, then you can get yourself into harm's way, and that thing can shoot down like a shot out of a gun and cause damage to the car or cause you personal injury. So right here, I could have made this portion go a little bit faster had I examined the area a little bit more closely and pulled that rubber grommet that's going up across the screen on the left of where I'm using the box wrench, and then pulled those metal pipes out of the way that are attached, I believe, to the air conditioning system. At this stage in the breakdown of the car, I'm not seeing that. I'm kind of got tunnel vision, so I'm just, working towards getting this off. And, this slows down the process of removing parts when you don't understand the full dynamic of what you can or what you need to remove to efficiently remove parts off of a car. One of the things that I took away from this session of working on the Saab was that professional mechanics, they know the tricks of the trade of how to fix things without having to take everything off of the car. But as a DIYer, as a novice or hobbyist, however you want to label a person, based upon me working on these cars, it seems a lot easier to just remove everything than it is to kind of finagle in and trying to work in tight spots to replace these components. And, in regards to the portion of the axle that I am attempting to remove on this vehicle, that's a perfect example. Like, I don't know how to get that part out. And when I stick the pry bar in, you'll see probably in another video, to try to leverage it away from the motor, it actually is lifting the motor and everything, because it's tied into the motor mount, and then also the transmission, and the transmission is tied into the actual engine. And so based upon my assessment so far, it's looking like I may end up having to remove the whole engine just to get this part out. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true, but my plan is, after this particular session of going to Pick and Pull, to go back on a later date, if the car is still available, and continue to remove parts and components to try to essentially either prove that theory right or prove it wrong. Now, I'm hoping that that's not the case, that that's the requirement. And if it is, I'm actually considering pulling the motor out of this 91 Saab, because I think it would be handy to have around just to tinker on, to try to keep the 91 Saab that I have running for a longer span of time. Sometimes I wish that I had a longer day, longer than 24 hours. Now, I don't wish that I had that so that I could go work more time on my regular job, but I wish that I had that so that I could do more things with my quote unquote free time. I mean, all of us have to sleep to some point, or at some point, but I realized that, some of the things that I took up as a hobby or DIY tasks that I've taken up, they require daylight hours. I mean, if I lived way out in the country somewhere where I wouldn't be disturbing other people running impact wrenches and running power tools and saws, then I could work around the clock. I mean, the other day when I got up, I was working throughout the day, and then it got later in the evening, and I wanted to continue to work. But the things that I needed to do required me to use power tools like my saws and such. And I don't want to cause issue with my neighbors. So I decided not to do that. And sometimes I get this restless spirit because I want to keep working. I want to keep pushing through. And other things that I could have chose to do, like say for instance, if I would have chose to do a YouTube channel around purchasing electronics and phones and gadgets and stuff like that, or if I would have chose to start a YouTube channel based around gaming, then I could have done those things late into the night. Now, I've already mentioned before, as far as the gaming aspect, even though I do play video games on occasion whenever I get time, I didn't want to send the wrong impression to my children and not help them to understand that in this life you do have to work, and you have to work hard. I don't want them to think that you could just play games all day and make a living, or that you can have a great future. And so that was one of the reasons why I didn't do a gaming type of channel, even though it's an aspect of my, interest. I purchased a lot of VR equipment, a lot of, I had gaming PCs and all the different consoles and such. But as I said, I kind of put that to the side as more of a hobby. And as far as electronics like phones and gadgets like that, that would have been nice to do. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it would not have fit my life, simply because, I mean, looking forward to now, a lot of the electronics that I bought back then, they're of no use anymore. They're basically obsolete. I spent $3,500 on a HoloLens that is basically just trash. And so I'm glad that I didn't go down that pathway. Whereas with me buying tools, both auto mechanic and woodworking, they have usability at all times, at least until they start putting chips and stuff and basically making things plan obsolescent. Like if you buy, new modern tools and they, have you doing updates on the tools to where, like, say a drill loses its torque, or where like a battery, let's say, I know I had batteries from my original Milwaukee M18 set that were still running. So imagine if they had new updated technology where they could send updates to that tool and thus for say, okay, he's got 300 charges on this battery. Let's go ahead and kill it so we can get this guy to come back in and spend more money with our company. It makes sense. It makes sense for the company to do that, because it keeps them in business. It keeps them paying their employees. Now, what that doesn't do is take into consideration me, the consumer. Like, I may not want to be a participant in that. I may want to buy something, and like my original Ego lawnmower, I owned it for 10 years and it actually still works. I only moved away from it simply because I wanted self-propel, and I would rather make that choice on my own, as opposed to, like, right now when you look at smartphones and technology like that, it really feels like, a device can be perfectly pristine in your hand, but it doesn't work. I got a replacement iPhone 12 for my broken iPhone 10, and I had to switch back to an old Note 8 as my main daily driver, because on that iPhone, it won't even open a YouTube app to play. And it's frustrating. And I've been kind of like on strike. I've been spending money here, I've been spending money there, but the one place that I've kind of refused to spend money on is on a new smartphone. Because for me, when I look at spending $500 for a quote budget phone, and when you look at the features that you get in these budget phones, it's hard to do when you've always bought the top tier phone. And now the top tier phone with everything, if you want 1 terabyte of storage for the larger video sizes, if you want the top, the biggest screen, if you want all of that, and then you also want that 2-year warranty, like say if you're buying an Apple phone, you're talking about $2,000. So that means if you make $100,000 a year, you're talking 2% of your annual gross income going towards a phone. And then now with, forced updates, you're going to have to buy a new phone every 2 to 3 years, or else you're going to be looking at a depreciating, as far as function, device. And for me and my wife, we typically do things together. And that means that if I buy a phone, I'm getting her a phone. And that goes up to, like, essentially, if you make $100,000 a year, that's 4% of your gross, annual income. That's $4,000 to get 2 phones maxed out with insurance coverage for those 2 years. I just think it's too much. Anyways, guys, this kind of wraps up this day of going to Pick and Pull. As you can see here, I'm removing a lot of components and just kind of progressing through this process. I want to remove everything I can so that I can get a clear sight of how to remove that transaxle. And as you can see here in this clip, when I got home, I decided to pull out my brand new Ego 1100 self-propelled mower. It has been very useful. It's helped me to get up and cut the yard like every 2 to 3 days, because my yard is a mixture of grass and weeds, and the weeds often grow faster than the grass. And so one of the things that drove me to using my cultivator to till up the lawn to try to regrow grass was because I got tired of it looking bad, because the weeds would be shooting up and the grass would be one level. And I didn't feel like I had the time to cut the grass every single day or every other day, with me working a full-time job and then also trying to grow in my woodworking and such. And so I decided to just go extreme, and I tore up the yard as far as like with the tiller, and I put down grass seed and dirt. Now, where I think I went wrong is the dirt that I bought those cheap $3 bags of dirt that you can get from Home Depot. And I never had so many weeds in my yard, but now as I look back, I think that those bags of dirt are basically seeded with weed seeds. And as a result, I think unbeknownst to me, when I put that dirt down just to kind of level out the lawn and to give some kind of a substance for the grass seed to grow, I think that I was basically germinating the yard with weeds. And so then it's ever since then it's been this process of wrestling and fighting the weeds that are growing up in the yard. And this particular season, I bought the lawnmower, and for the most part, I'm just going to cut the grass. This self-propelled lawnmower has helped me a great deal to where it's taken less energy for me to do the task. I may not do any kind of major yard stuff this season, other than maybe like spray the yard with different kinds of, like the weed spray and stuff like that. And I'll wait until the off season and do the whole pre-emergent stuff and try to do it at the proper time so that maybe I can see some benefits, because it was backbreaking to actually toil up or till up the whole front and backyard to try to get the results that I got, which are basically less than stellar. So anyways, you live and you learn. Once you've done something for yourself, you have your answers as far as like if something is worth it or if it's useful. Even though I spent a lot of money, a lot of time doing that, I still am not willing to pay like quote unquote a professional to manage this. I would rather keep on tinkering and trying different modalities and different techniques to try to see if I can unlock the mystery of how to have a good, nice, presentable lawn. It's worth it to me to learn it, because once you learn something, it can't be taken away for the most part. And when you just pay somebody to do a job for you, something especially like this, mowing your lawn and trimming stuff like that, then you learn nothing. And as soon as you stop paying, it's like a Netflix subscription. You get all of the bad that comes with not being a person that was willing to pay on your own or whatever. And whereas if you put in the effort, you learn how to do it yourself, you not only can help yourself, you can help people that you may consider to be your friends and or your family, and you can help them propel further in life. And overall, I don't really feel like it hurts the economy to do stuff yourself. In all honesty, I feel like all you're doing is shifting where your money goes, because at least in my case, I chose to take a lot of the savings that I got from doing DIY and reinvest that into higher quality tools so that I can, try to get better quality results. I could have went with a push mower, but I got this self-propelled mower. I don't have a yard that's large enough to have a riding mower, so that would have been ridiculous. But having the ability to upgrade my tools as I see fit, I find it makes me more productive. It makes me enjoy my work more, and it keeps me, fresh, because, work is a part of life. It's something that, at least in my life, I have not found a way to get away from. And, life is not all fun and games for me. So I enjoy taking some of my hard-earned money and reinvesting it in myself in the form of purchasing tools and hardware that's going to help make my life a little bit more easy and a little bit more simple. Anyways, guys, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch even a minute of this video. I look forward to getting back in the wood shop. I have a few more of these types of videos that I need to produce, because it's basically really what I'm doing. And I don't want to leave big blocks of time as I have by in between woodworking tasks, because sometimes I can't get in the shop. That's just a fact. If I could, I would go in there every day, but life does not allow that. And so on Daddy Share Space, I am trying to share with you what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, whenever I can make the video. So for those of you that appreciate this content, thank you, and I will see you in my next one. Take care.